Namaste. I'm very happy to be in VIKASA. I really enjoy to teach here and to be here, and I wish further success for VIKASA for sure. And I wish you to develop it wider in many places where you will decide. And about my childhood, from the background, I grew up at family of intelligent people. My father and mother graduated university. Father was engineer of cybernetics, and mother was foreign languages teacher. And in childhood, of course, they tried to teach me, but approximately somewhere at age 9, I started don't follow anything what parents told me, and I became very much independent. At the same time, it doesn't mean I did anything wrong. I just didn't like when somebody is commanding me or ruling me, but I never was spending any time on the streets, and from the young age, like maybe like from 7 to 12, I constantly was taking a part in different children clubs. Like I was studying at the same time parallelly in 4 clubs, like national Ukrainian folk dances and also music, and also I graduated music school, and 2 actually, and also did sports parallelly, and I did swimming, and also I took a part in technical clubs where I, like at childhood, they taught us how to make some ships, airplanes, rockets, and we compete how they fly and run, who is better in that, like when you manually do everything like from separate materials. So that's why I was busy with this, including studying in school all the time, and I never spent my lifetime for anything not useful. That's why it was before 13. And then when I became older, I was involved in national team of swimming of Ukraine, and it was monofin swimming and also subwater navigation. And at age 16, I became master of sport, and later at the age 21, I was absolute champion of Ukraine of this sport. And I think most of the discipline I developed doing sports, because looking at all members of my team, we had our team meeting not a long time ago. All people became successful in their life. No one became drunker or drug or anything like that, because people choose for themselves different activities, what they do, but they became anywhere successful because discipline was given by sports, and this is an important thing. When I graduated secondary school, at the time I was, as I mentioned, in national team of monofin swimming, and at that time I absolutely was thinking about only to swim. I was very serious about it because it was professional team. At the same time, when I graduated school, at the time was war. My country, Ukraine, at the time was part of Soviet Union, and Soviet Union had war with Afghanistan at that time. And my friend was killed in Afghanistan just like recently, right before that. That's why my father directed me to start to study as engineer for military. In this case, I had education which related to military, and in this case I become intelligence for military, and they don't send me to die to Afghanistan. So because I was only one child in family, my parents strongly didn't even ask me about it. They just like told me, this is what you do. And this is only the reason why I decided to become engineer. I never had interest to do this. But at the same time, I graduated university very good, and after that I was working as engineer only for years. It was in Soviet Union like a system, you get free education, but payment for your education, you have to work for 3 years after that for government where they need you. But I decided if I spend this time, but I will do PhD instead of just be regular engineer. And I was working on PhD, and it took longer time, it took 4 years. And exactly when I finished my work on the PhD, Ukraine became independent country from Russia. And all these orders which I had for my PhD, they were coming from Russia. So basically for me, like all finances for this particular technology which I developed stopped. And for me, it was only choice like, do I want to do some small orders or not? But exactly at that time happened another thing which actually pulled me completely out of engineering, and I became professional yoga teacher, and that is a separate story.
And how did that happen?
And that happened, I started practice yoga right after I returned from Mongolia, and I was living in Mongolia 1 year. I was a little bit involved in Buddhism there, and I tried to find in Ukraine anything related to Buddhism. After that, I was not able because KGB took everything out of libraries and was not possible to find even books. That's why I somehow, like teenager, associated that yoga is related to Buddhism. That's why I started practice yoga and Chinese martial arts. But by the age 16, I understood that I like yoga more philosophy-wise, because in martial arts, like you develop yourself through pushing partner down. And in yoga, it's all like liberal for everybody, and you don't need to push anybody down. So I like this philosophy better. So that's why at 16, I consciously stopped to do martial arts and just was practicing yoga only. And when I was already a student of university at that time, I was involved to be yoga teacher. I never wanted, but it happened after first course of university. We had summer camp, 1 month. And with all group of my friend students who were studying together with me. And every morning I woke up early and I went out to practice yoga on the grass. And they wake up later and they look in the window and they see that I'm practicing. And when I return, they ask me, like, what are you doing there? I said, I practice yoga. Can we try with you? I said, of course, you're welcome. So when they tried, they like it very much. And after that, they were practicing with me all that month of summer camp. And after that, when we returned back to our city, they wanted to have prolongation of this, and we met, and I taught them classes. But you know, when you have even like 6 or 8 people, if you are practicing at home, even if you move all furniture out, it's still not enough space for you to practice normally. That's why we suffered like this for some time, but then it pushed us finally to rent some room for practice of yoga, and we rented gymnastic gym, which was big, which was able, in the gym was possible to fit 80 people. So as soon as we have got such a big space, they immediately started to invite friends. That friends invited their friends and children and parents. So like during 2 months only, I have got 300 students. So I never planned to become yoga teacher, but it happened in that way, like spontaneously. So, and for me, it was definitely not for money, because at the time I was student. I was just studying, and I never thought that it will become my professional future. So, and also because of this, 300 people were very much different. Some of them had some physical experience of practice before, some were not, some were children, some were parents, and they had some body limitations. I specialized them in like children group, and also different levels, like first level group, second level group, and also group for senior practitioners, like old people. And having already this, I was studying in university, and then later I did my PhD, and I was teaching all the time these 4 groups, 2 classes every day at the evening. And when Ukraine became independent country, at that time embassies of all countries opened embassies in Kiev, because I'm from capital of Ukraine. And first ambassador of India was very enthusiastic in popularization of Indian culture in Ukraine, because he wanted to have students exchange. At the time in India, they had high interest to study medical science and engineering from Ukraine, and they didn't want to pay money for this. That's why they wanted to have students exchange. And for this were necessary to develop interest of Ukrainian citizens to study something in India. So that's why I didn't know about this, I understood this later. But he started from the first his year in Ukraine to run particular programs of cultural exchange. And he invited me as a leader of yoga group to show on the stage yoga practices with like myself and with my students. And we did this during 2 years. We took a part in 6 programs like this, and we showed quite advanced level of practice. And he invited there also like people who practice Indian dances, Indian music, Indian poetry, and Indian students who were studying in Ukraine also to show that they learned some Ukrainian poetry and Ukrainian songs. And it was just like free programs of exchange of culture. But then after 2 years, and it was exactly time when I already finished my work with PhD, and also it was half year after Ukraine became, later. It was 2 years after Ukraine became independent country. He invited me to embassy and he said, we want to finance, to sponsor your studies in India. And he said, we will buy you air tickets, we will pay for your hotel, we will give you visa gratis, like a guest of country, and which gives you like more rights than another visas. And you just pick any yoga teacher in India you like, and we will send you to study to the teacher for free. So I was, of course, very much excited. And when I made decision to do it, my father was very much disappointed, because he said, like, 10 years of excellent education, now you will be who, like a yoga teacher? So, and yes, I decided to be a yoga teacher professionally, because engineering was never what I wanted to do. It was just my payment for don't go to the war in Afghanistan. And I, at the time, was very much interested in teaching of Iyengar, because I read many yoga books, but his book impressed me very much with accuracy and very good organization of description of the old techniques. That's why I wanted to study with him. And this Mr. Devara, first ambassador of India and Ukraine, he sent me to Iyengar for study for free. And I was coming to him for a few years regularly, and that was our deal when I was studying with Iyengar. Because Mr. Devara known Iyengar personally, they were neighbors for until 1972. They lived in the same house, rented the same house. And when I was studying with Iyengar, at that time I also met some students, foreigners, who first time told me about Pattabhi Jois, because I didn't know anything about Pattabhi Jois at that time. But after agreement was that I will study with Iyengar every year for 2 months for free. So when the 2 months finished, but I still had time and money and unlimited visa. So that's why I went to Pattabhi Jois to study Ashtanga Vinyasa, and I became first student of Ashtanga Vinyasa from formal Soviet countries. I was first who came to him. And then I also was studying with him for a few years after that. Yoga is science about religiousness. And there is difference between religion and a life religiousness. So, for example, person who has a vacant state can become person who holds religiousness. So if you have internal purity, you will be honest only based on your purity, but not because you have some rules which you have to follow. When people follow rules from the mind, it is dogmats, and this is religion. When people inside, they are not pure, do not lie. But if you get purity inside, you are naturally following rules of what we call religion, but actually it is a result of your religiousness, of purity. And for this you don't need to do anything from your mind, because you just have natural qualities to be a spiritual person. So this is the difference, and I believe that yoga is developing purity, and qualities which in some religions people promote automatically are coming as a result of practice, as a result of purification. And yes, on this level, yes, it is related to religion, yes, but not in the way of blind belief. So when we purify ourselves on many levels, that is given flowers of these results. And these results are the pure conditions which in religions considered to be like rules. But when people in religions try to follow it from their mind, very often it doesn't work. In India, I contacted teachers as Shivananda Ashram, Swami Satyananda Saraswati Ashram, and less known at the time. I also actually studied with in Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram in Madras with teachers after Krishnamacharya passed away. Also, there were teachers who are not well known, and to say their names is absolutely like no reason. Like Yogacharya Rudra, who knows him? So now people call him Rudra Dev, but who knows him? But another also teachers who people don't know. So it doesn't make sense to somehow say their names. But of course, Iyengar and Pattabhi Jois made a strong influence at me on the physical level of representation of yoga. At the same time, having good education, I developed a lot of methodics myself, because I understood the essential things, what they do, for what purpose they do, and I believe that that's how I teach, and what I do on the basis of development of their teaching to the higher level. That's why essentially I use the ideas, but I think I pretend to do it better. According to the traditional yoga, it is not my personal theory, but if you will just look at traditional texts of yoga, they always talk about pancha kosha. And pancha in Sanskrit means 5, kosha means shell. So pancha kosha means 5 shells. And old Vedas are talking about these 5 shells. There are new Vedas which are talking about 7 shells. All of them are talking about that human consists of the shells. And it is, if you talk about 5 of them, it is first physical, second energetic, third psychic, fourth mental, and fifth karmic. And in yoga, practices are existent for every of this shell. And if people practice yoga on the physical level only, they can get a lot of benefits on the physical level. They can become beautiful, healthy. They will get a lot of qualities, like they will be flexible, strong, balanced. In the same way, if people understand benefits what on the physical level they get from yoga, if they will try to do practices which are designed specially for energy and for psychic and for mind and for karma, they will get also significant improvement of their life on these levels. So that's why I was always interested myself to do yoga as full system, as full path. That's why I call it universal yoga as a symbol that this is not narrow specialized, because any another styles of yoga which we know now under different names, they are not full yoga systems. They are narrow specialized. So if you will look, for example, at Iyengar yoga or at Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga, it is obvious that people mainly practice on the physical level. If you will take any another famous like power yoga or vinyasa flow or whatever, like Jivamukti, they mainly focus on the physical. Even if they do something like vegetarianism and Jivamukti, it's still all about purification on the physical level and how much people do internal practices for another shells. So that's why in universal yoga, I believe we have to follow traditional yoga. That's why under this name, I basically try to teach people traditional full system of yoga. And the name universal I use only as contradictionary to the narrow names of narrow specialized yogas, when people do only something or for the body, or for the energy, or for meditation, but not for all as complex. And we are doing all as complex, full system of yoga. During history of development of yoga were many methodics, and they were developed at different historical time. Now, when people practice different types of yoga, they don't realize, because they simply don't know to which historical period of time some particular methodic belong. But there are methodics which are very old, and there are methodics which are belong to middle centuries. There are methodics which are quite young, and actually they are product of constant development of the effectivity of yoga practice for the major purpose of yoga. And major purpose of yoga is state of unification and state of consciousness which is free of clashes and free of the reasons of sadness, and when we have natural happiness. For regular people it is sukha, and for yogis it is based on neutrality, santosh. So because of this, when people don't understand different, they practice or this yoga or that yoga or something else, and they think they are all equal, but they're not equal. So in reality, there are methodics which are most effective, which can give you enlightenment in one life. And there are methodics which will never bring you to enlightenment, or they will bring you to enlightenment after 500 reincarnations. So when people don't understand yoga as a spiritual path of complete liberation and enlightenment, they see yoga only as entertainment. In this case, they don't care about all what I say now. They just think about, oh, do I have beautiful butt or not? So is it sexy or not? Like, can I do split and can I get leg behind the head or not? Why? Because we want to get it on Instagram and we want some people like us and finally to have sex. So, or something like that, or make money because I'm like super flexible teacher, so, or super strong. Many people are inspired by this kind of not yogic tendencies because this has nothing to do with yoga. And what is yoga? I invite all people to really like go to the traditional texts, read, because we cannot under the name yoga sell whatever, because yoga has particular formulation done not by us but by creators from the ancient times. We need to know this. So if you try to reach really yogic goals, then we are looking for what is most effective to reach yogic goals. And in my with my experience of learning yoga, I started, as I mentioned already, with kind of physical yoga. When I was younger, at that time for me it was very interesting, and I was absolutely, as now many people, stick with physical effectivity. And as formal sportsman, for me it was like most interesting. That's why background for physical practices, what I have is of course Iyengar and Pattabhi Jois, no doubt. But I believe that I develop their methodics to a more effective level. And I can prove it. I don't afraid it. Anyone want to challenge me, come. We will try. Like, let's try to talk about essence, what you do and how you reach this result. And what kind of sequences you do and what kind of levels you do. So for me, I understand this very clear. And I can talk with any professional of any level about this. And if they will find the way to show me that I don't know something, I will just say thank you. If you can, try. So, and on the level of another shells, if you're talking about energetic, pranayamas practice, energy exercises are very interesting, and practice of chakras and rasas, psychic emotional conditions, kundalini awakening, ecstatic tantric practices, they are very just great because it feels not describable great. And on the basis of my personal practical experience, if you do this kind of practices, I don't know anything what feels better. That's why reason why I teach people this, because I tried different yoga practices. I found this particular practices as most effective and most feels super. Like there is nothing what I feel better. And I know in other people who try, they also feel like this. Because of this, Asian countries mainly are using these practices as the main now. Not asanas, because asanas are painful, but this is number one. But I teach asanas, of course, because now it is popular, people want it, and through this, through physical practices, which in universal yoga are most effective in the world, I can bring people to the more high level of consciousness with tantric practices, if they want. And because I was learning with different teachers, I basically now see unity of root of tantric practices of Hinduism and Buddhism. That's why I consider myself belong to the lineage of the three yogis Mahasiddhis, who didn't consider themselves following any religion, or Hinduism or Buddhism. They were kind of religious scientists who can, on the basis of their practical experience, themselves create religions. Question is only for what. If you have already some religious practices which are effective, it is not the purpose to develop one more which will be yours. That's why yogis Mahasiddhis don't produce new religions, not because they cannot, but only because for what? If you have already methods which are done by another masters before, and they're working. So I feel in teaching of this lineage most profound, most advanced and beautiful and wise knowledge, which is inspiring me a lot, and I'm trying to practice this myself as much as I can, and I try to teach it for my students as much as I can. Because I have university education, I know that in many cases people teach yoga only when they don't have another better job. So that's why often happening that people pretend to be gurus without any even formal education, which can be good. But actually to be guru you must to have bright IQ, minimum. So, and many people who now produce entertainment, I can call it not yoga, only because they don't have that bright IQ. That's why they make primitive types of practices and they represent it for another people because they themselves are limited very much and they teach limited things. So for me, situation happened in another way. Having good university education, I went to the most simple work, which is teaching yoga. That's why I have good education and I know how to work with information. At the same time, even if I look like white guy, actually I spent in Eastern countries so much that I just externally look like European guy, but internally I'm deeply Asian. I'm deeply Eastern inside. I think in this way, I believe in this way. So that's why in me you can find good combination of well-qualified Eastern teacher in combination with good level, high level of Western education. That's why I can explain Eastern deep teachings in Western logical, clear and simple way when everybody can understand it. And out of that, how I explain now, you already can feel it. Correct. Because I speak clear, simple and understandable. So, and like this, if you study anything, it is like this. What I represent with programs, I have different formats, depends on where I work. There are 3 formats now. One format is for English-speaking students, one format for Russian-speaking students, one format for Chinese-speaking students. And because I speak 2 languages, I can speak English and I can speak Russian. I also can teach in Ukrainian, of course, but usually it's not often happening. When I teach in one language, like in English or in Russian, I can, during same time, give to people maximum information. But when I teach with Chinese translation, information-wise, I can give twice less. Practices are same, amount of practices which people do is same, but quantity of information which people get during the same time is twice less because of translation. So that's why in English I use format consists of the 3 parts only. And the same amount of information in Chinese format with translation people get with 5 parts. So that what is in English part 1, in Chinese it is part 1 and 2. That what is in English part 2, it is in Chinese format part 3 and 4. And that is what is in English part 3, in Chinese format it is part 5. Must be part 5 and 6, but because Yoga Alliance has only formats 200 hours, 300 hours and 500 hours, I don't want to go above 500 hours, but actually it just shows that when we are talking about part 3 English format and part 5 in Chinese format people don't get enough and equal quantity of information, not practice but information, as in part 3 of English format, simply because I cannot go above 500 hours. Okay? And in Russian format I also have 5 parts, even if I teach in one language, only because of mentality, because people who study yoga from formal Soviet countries, I don't know how it happened, but they kind of take yoga more serious, and they don't go only for 200 hours just to get certificate and then never remember what is the name of teacher, as in many English-speaking countries I met. So that's why I just teach 5 parts in one language for them much deeper. That's why every part in Russian format is much deeper. Same as I teach in 3 parts in English in one language, same information but deeper I teach in 5 parts in Russian format. So this is for your orientation. Then if you are talking about English format, part 1 includes all about asanas, about all types of asanas, like stretching asanas, strengthening asanas, balancing asanas, and also theory of creation of any asanas, and also ability to create asanas, adjust them, all techniques of adjustments, alignments, asanas for physical training, asanas for pranayamas, asanas for concentration meditation, asanas for relaxation restoration. So partner asanas, many things. I just don't want to go deeply to the program, many things. So about asanas, it is most wide and profound course in the world. Nobody is representing asanas on that level. So then in part 2, we have professional methodics, what to do with asanas. And actually we start part 2 with Himalayan Vinyasa. So now in Western countries, people know only one vinyasa: Chaturanga, upper facing dog, Chaturanga, down facing dog. I call it American vinyasa. But actually in Himalayan Vinyasa, they use 14 groups of vinyasas, and every group of vinyasas has many vinyasas. So these vinyasas have different functions, linking asanas between themselves. So we learn first all of this dynamic system of linking, and then when we have asanas from first part and vinyasas from second part, we also learn methods of sequencing. So rules of warming up, they are scientific. Then schemes of training sequences based on that, how we can move energy using asanas through the body. Then orientation in space and how we can create mandalas with turning in space, doing sequence oriented in different way on the mat. And also digital balance of training sequences, which is related to the balance of sequence itself. And many things like interconnected groups of muscles, and also which side must be first or left or right, and etc. And when we know all of this, it's like we have materials to build house. So when we have already bricks, and we have glass, and we have wood, and we have metal, we can already talk about architecture. So then we start to build sequences. And also in second part we learn substyles, how scientifically we can modify substyles. There are 16 substyles in Universal Yoga, 16 dualities. And just to give you a little sense of this, like for example, you can do static practice, you can do dynamic practice, or you can do static dynamic practice. You can do strengthening practice, or you can do stretching practice, so you can mix them together. So like this. So we have 16 options of dualities and we can modify sequences with narrow specialization, what we want, or with wide representation of few qualities together. So people must know, then they can build any sequences they want. That's why from the point of view of Universal Yoga, when some people say that, oh, I created new asana, or oh, I created new sequence, it's just like funny, because we can create per day like hundreds of sequences and like thousands of asanas, no problem, because we have methods of creation of any asanas, any vinyasas, any sequences. So that's why how many you want, just tell us and we will create for you, no problem. So this is part 3. It is part 2. Part 2 is professional sequencing, when you know what to teach and how to teach. In this case, part 1 and part 2 is methodic related to the channel of the touch. People have 5 channels: hearing, vision, smell and tasting, and touch. Because now most of the people think that yoga is all about physical, we represent for people in part 1 and 2 methodics related to the asanas, vinyasas, pranayamas, and also sequences. In this case, you know how to use physical exercises, organize them in energetic structures, and this is one of the methodics related to the channel of the touch. And it will be not all if we will not use also methodics related to the channel of the hearing and vision, which is mantra yoga and yantra yoga. And also if we involve touch channel in these practices also, it will be tantra yoga. So that's why we have part 3. So part 3 is internal yoga practices, which are linking together mantras, yantras, and tantras. And this is already work with chakras, with energy like Kundalini awakening, with ecstatic tantric samadhi, and based on this progress, spiritual progress, when people can be stably in balanced consciousness state, and through this overcome any roots of clashes, sufferings, according to the main goal of yoga. So also, of course, it includes methodics of karma and how to perfect yourself on the karmical level, or overcome and get rid of any karma if you prefer. So this is briefly. So part 1 and 2 people do familiar for most of the people practice of asanas, vinyasas, pranayamas, and different sequences. Difference is only that we are practicing on the cross mat. So because we change orientation, we not only practice face forward, we also use mandala sequences oriented on the mat to the different directions. That's why for this we need cross mat. All another is basically same what people familiar with. But not methodics, not information wise, but I mean how class looks like. And when it comes to the internal practices, all what we do is oriented to the software, not to your hardware, because asana practice is based on the hardware. But when we want to get results on the level of software, we don't need to do much asanas. We do, but not much. And we do asanas as mudras with pranayamas and bandhas. And mainly practices are designed based on sitting practices in the special cabins when you have altars, and you learn how to do traditional practices, doing necessary things for success in Tantra as offerings, as work with altar. And at the same time we do pranayamas, mantras, yantras, tantras, and with purpose of activization of chakras, finally Kundalini awakening, and going through the many steps, because these practices have 4 parts: external practices, internal practices, secret practices, and complete practices. And each of them have few steps. So perfecting yourself through going through these steps is that program. During 12 days of part 3 is impossible to reach final result of this methodic, but it is instructional program when people can get guidance how to do it, and if they will practice in future themselves, they can get results, or they can return to these programs again and perfect on the high level. What many people do now, I have in this course which I run now, it is part 3, I have 8 or 9 students who are repeating internal practices. They did it last year, they repeat now again, because they feel they want to grow. Often people say about many things a little bit, like I'm practicing yoga a little bit, I'm drinking wine a little bit, I'm smoking mushrooms a little bit. So that's what I'm doing in the monastery in Himalayas. I do not a little bit. This is related to my personal spiritual path, which I do not for as my work, not for even charging people any money or anything like this. I do practice it there for myself. I found for myself in Himalayas school and monastery which I follow myself, and all what I do there is related to my personal internal spiritual practices. So yes, this monastery is in Nepal, and I'm there already for 16 years, and I'm very happy about all what I get there and what I practice there, and results which I get and instructions which I get. I'm very happy about it. If to do, for example, external practices which are hardware oriented, which are asanas, vinyasas, and pranayamas, I believe that Vikasa is excellent place, because here is very clean nature, good air, food is excellent for yogis, and it's just like your soul is singing songs here when you practice. It's absolutely great. So that's why I absolutely appreciate all what you do, and I wish you to spread it wider in the world, to have more places like this, because this is not only how you do place for practice, but it is also how you set up healthy food, and people can save a lot of time. Normally when programs are running in some other places, you spend a lot of time after program to go somewhere, to some restaurant where you eat, and then to go to some place where you stay. And here everything is so close that people basically don't spend any time to go from practice to place where they eat, to place where they live, and everything is in very clean ecological place, which is amazing, and beautiful view, excellent. So, and if you are talking about internal practices, I can say there is only one wishable thing for internal practices, which is checked already by many practitioners at past. Ideally, to do these practices can be on the high altitude, like between 1.5 and 400, between 1.5 kilometers and 4 kilometers altitude, because success for Kundalini awakening is based on the proportion of oxygen and CO2 in the air. And if we have like condensed wet air, which we have in Vikasa, it is not the best state we need for Kundalini awakening. So this is only what I can say, and we cannot change it. So it is as it is, and practice cannot be ideal. Like, we can try to do this kind of practices high in the Himalayas, but there will be another problem. They can be cold in the mountains, or there will be not good food as it is in Vikasa. So every program has something pluses and minuses. So I can say I wish to have controlled temperature in the room, and in this case it will be very comfortable for students. And when I can completely regulate what temperature will be, with good ventilation, with fresh air, which is absolutely doable here in Vikasa, but altitudes we cannot change. So, but I think like introduction to the internal practices, we absolutely can do it in Vikasa, and if then people want to try to do it in the mountains on the high altitudes, they can do it afterwards. Thank you very much for all what you do in Vikasa. I wish you further success. I'm very happy teaching here, and I hope you will just grow and develop more and more success for you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.